Herzlich willkommen, liebe Zuschauer. Schön, dass ihr wieder eingeschaltet habt zu diesem neuen Interview, das ich heute auf Englisch führen werde. Ich gebe mein Bestes und spreche heute mit einer Heilerin und spirituellen Lehrerin, ähm, die im deutschsprachigen Raum noch nicht so sehr bekannt ist und die ich euch gerne vorstellen möchte. Skylar ist Heilerin, spirituelle Lehrerin, Medical Intuitive. Sie ist Ernährungsberaterin, sie ist Lehrerin für Theta Healing und sehr viel mehr. Und wir sprechen heute über ihre Medical Intuitive Technik. Herzlich willkommen. Hi, Skylar. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, lovely. I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you so much for using your incredible translation skills.
Yeah,
It's a
I
real
will
honor.
try my very best. So I would like to talk with you about your medical intuitive technique. But first of all, I would like the audience to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
Could you tell us something about what are you doing? What is your work? And for most important, what was your personal healing story? What brought you to work as a healer and a spiritual teacher?
Oh, when it comes to the story, it was chronic illness when I was very young. And I remember being told when I was 10 that I had Hashimoto's and that I would be ill for the rest of my life. And I was very traditional. You know, I was a very high grade student. My parents were very into education, but losing my health and having them in the main system not be able to help had a profound effect on me. And I think it opened me to a higher power or to other things that I would not have been open to without that illness. And I had a big spiritual awakening at 17. And then within a year, my illnesses had resolved. And that's when it became real for me that your illness comes from a disconnection from God and a disconnection from yourself. But I didn't know how powerful that was. I just knew that I wanted to help people, and that's how it began. And then it grew into medical intuition.
So I wanted to talk about your medical intuitive technique that you developed. We can begin with a very basic question. What is health and what is a disease?
From a metaphysical perspective, disease is a disconnection from yourself and a disconnection from your higher power that causes so much distress or dis-ease in your body that you no longer want to be on the planet, or that your pain manifests in the planet. Health is a manifestation of wholeness within yourself and within your connection to a higher power. The two things are so connected because it's the higher power that made us and that remembers who we are, even when we've forgotten, even when there's parts of our nature that we reject or we don't understand. So many people reconnect to themselves and it doesn't seem to be enough to create permanent health. But when they reconnect to their higher power, they remember something that's far beyond me and you, that keeps that within them and helps them create a life that's in alignment with who that is, what they came here to do, who they came here to be. Medical intuitive technique was created because, especially at the beginning of COVID, I suddenly had an explosion of clients because especially in the UK, all of the GPs closed, all of the hospitals closed. And suddenly there were so many people who were waiting and waiting and waiting, and who were not in a small amount of pain. They were waiting for surgeries, or they were waiting for everything from injections to doctor's appointments. And I was in London. I had a small and decent clinic. It was filled most of the time, but suddenly I had queues, and I didn't know how to make sure that those people would be safe and they would be taken care of if I gave them to somebody else, because there wasn't anyone else at that point that I knew doing what I was doing. I knew people that did body scans. I knew people that could do, like theta healing and digging, but I didn't know that they would be able to be with the pain the way that I was. I didn't know if they would potentially become triggered by the other person's disease, which I saw a lot do, because most of the trainings are like a week long or a few days long. And that level of pain, especially if the person's been in it for 10, 20 years, it triggers people, and especially the kids. That one was a whole different system. And then just for fun, I found out I was pregnant. And that's when I was like, okay, I have to do it now, because if I don't do it now, then I'm definitely not going to do it for another 4 or 5 years. And I remember my brain going, you're going to launch a medical intuition course in the middle of a pandemic. It can't be more obvious. You can't and my husband, he's very into conspiracy theories. He's very into, he's very protective. And here I am with the government going, you guys, people are, should be terrified of a virus. And I'm going, you can heal anything. If you need to heal the body. You were 100% connected. And my husband going, oh my God. And I remember him saying, I'm going to go out to, he went out to a lot of protests, and he's saying, Sky, look, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to have your back. And he was like, but I don't know, it's either going to be fine or it's not going to be fine. But I think that was the catalyst. I think that there were so many people asking why. I think that there were so many people, particularly because at that point, COVID was incurable. There was no solution, that were suddenly praying and asking questions and going higher than what was available, that it was just some sort of divine timing. But for me, it was needing to help people because, I'm not good at watching people suffer long term if you can help. And the other aspect was, getting pregnant with my son and realizing that within 9 months, I would be, not be able to help at least for 3 to 4 months, but also that the mortality kicks in when you're going to do childbirth. You're like, you're not going to live forever. If there's a chance that I'm not here, God knows how many lifetimes that has come up for me. Then this work needs to be there now. People need to have it now, just in case. So there you go. That's how it came about.
Yeah. So you talked about our disconnection from God, and this is the root of a disease. During the last 10 years, I worked a lot with reprogramming beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And during your medical intuitive technique, I was confronted with my feelings, and very intensively confronted with my feelings. And I noticed how strongly I was disconnected from them and also disconnected from my body. So what is the significance of thoughts and what is the significance of emotions for healing?
So what explained this to me was A Course in Miracles.
Mm.
Right? But for many, almost 20 years now, I've been heavily into Course in Miracles. And it just explains in a very simple way that's non-denominational, powerful spiritual laws and principles. But what it explains is that the body was never supposed to hold thoughts, and the body was never supposed to hold emotions. Right? Those were supposed to be processed by your soul and your higher mind, what we actually call the soul chakra, which is above your head. What happened through history is that we were taught that we were only a body. And this is very Newtonian thinking, right? And you can also see the explosion in disease that came with that idea. Because before then, humans were taught from birth that they were a soul in a body, having a human experience. Whatever religious abuse was going on, they knew that they were a soul in a body. Then when Newtonian thinking came along, they were taught that they were a body without a soul. And that transferred all of the thoughts and all of the emotions into the physical body. And as long as your thoughts are, I would say, relatively balanced, your body will still work. When the thoughts become out of balance, and the more that we are in pain, the more that we suffer, the more injustice that we have, which inevitably accumulates as we get older, right? Depending on where that is happening, because each group of organs represents a different heaven or a different energy system or a different aspect of our lives, right? A different place in the wheel of life. And you will find that you experience pain in those areas. So for example, for me, because I was a child and in my home, children weren't allowed to have a voice, right? So that's where the thyroid issues came in, because my job was to do what my parents said and to do it well. It wasn't to be myself. So and that's not the way, that's what I mean. That's not the way God makes children. God makes people to come here and do what God wants. He doesn't make people to come here and be clones of their parents or of their government, or, there's a higher power that very much has a purpose for people. And when we decided that we were only bodies, that was another consequence, is that then we think of children as something that we made instead of something that comes through us, but doesn't belong to us and never did, right? With their own natures and their own thoughts. And you don't have to look far to find a lot of parenting books teaching you how to control a child. It's very hard to find a parenting book teaching you how to love a child. Right? So you can see that absence of love, not just when the child is born, but when the child is in the womb, creates distortions. Now, there's a big difference between thoughts and emotions. And what I'm about to say is a little bit controversial, even in metaphysical circles, but it's my experience. Emotions come first. So you have emotions before you know what a thought is, before you can put an alphabet together. Emotions are energy, and energy is the language of the universe. A baby feels sad, feels angry, feels happy, before it can put words together. The thought is the ability to organize emotions and organize energies, right? Which comes as part of our divine right order. They both exist in symbiosis, because thoughts exist regardless of whether you were born, and emotions exist regardless of whether you were born. So you're tapping into the collective consciousness of both. But for humans, we definitely experience energy first, and then we organize them into thoughts. And that divine feminine, then divine masculine, which is very not the way the world is right now. Chaos, then order, right? But the way emotions create disease is that we are taught not to connect to energy and not to feel feelings. We're taught to control feelings. And we are taught to very much that only some feelings are safe, right? And in humans, mostly it's happiness and sadness are safe and the rest are not safe. There's over 3,000 feelings, right? When you're not taught to feel and you are a being, like you are an omnipresent being, of course it leaves you in balance. And that's why you get men that tend to be more angry and women that tend to be more sad, not because we are not able to express that there is more, but because we were told that there being more is wrong. Right? And both thoughts and feelings are an expression of life. They're an expression of the universe. They are bigger than us, and humans can't handle living a lie. So when we're told that we have to lie about the full extent of our feeling, the full extent of our thoughts, the full extent of our desires, the full capacity of who we are and what we came here to do, that makes us really, really sad. There's a grieving process that goes on. you know, there's a grieving process that goes on, and there's a, like you said, a disembodiment, because it hurts so much to be in the body. It hurts so much to be alive and not be allowed to live.
Mm.
And especially as children, we can't put words on that kind of pain. It's existential, you know. So that's how thoughts and emotions can cause disease. They're huge. And this is why with medical intuitive technique, I kid you not, they're huge. If you imagine that each one represents a university, like thoughts represent, like, let's say, Harvard University, and thought and emotions represent Cambridge University, right? They're huge. You could go there and study your whole life and never really understand. And you could work for, like you said, 10, 20, 30 years, but only be in one department and not understand the other department. So they're huge. It's not about, you know, them not being enough. It's just you need a higher mind to know what to use and when to use it and how much to use it to create wholeness.
Mm. Mm. What I found special in your technique was working with the wound itself. Could you explain us what is the meaning of the wound itself?
So the wound itself is an ancient archetype that's been with healers a long, long time. And it came to my awareness very early in my healing journey. I think it started with me because of I was wounded, right? And that's what took me to healing, but I couldn't see it in myself. But the first powerful healer that I met had ME, and he would heal people, but he couldn't walk from the, you know, from the conservatory to the kitchen. He had a wheelchair. And I was I was dating his son at the time. I didn't even know he was a healer until 2 years after being with his son. I didn't know healing existed, right? It's not like normal. But my then boyfriend's family, they took me to Orkney and Sky. And that's where I met other healers, all of whom were also sick. And that's when something went off, because I didn't understand the collective consciousness, but I knew that this was a pattern.
Mm.
And I knew that it was a pattern in very strong healers. And when I asked them, they said that it was about compassion. Like, unless they understood what people were going through, that they wouldn't have had the patience or the ability to sit there and be with those people for that many years. So they were definitely mastering a virtue, right? When I got into theta, that's where I was taught that, you know, there were beliefs around you absorbing people's emotions and things like that. But I had already had contact with faith healers and channelers that were healing people, but that were simultaneously getting sick. And I did see many theta and many hypnotists, because I was already a hypnotist then, who were also getting sick. And I found it a pattern. Even in me, I had to be very careful in the beginning, more with children than adults, right? Much more with children than adults, that I wouldn't just, because the words came out almost involuntarily. I would be sitting next to their bed. I would be seeing how much they were suffering, and the words would say, God, take me instead, right? Give it to me. Just, if they don't have to suffer, I'll take it. And you could see the bargaining, and it's such a big part of the collective consciousness, right? Somebody, I'll sacrifice me, or I'll sacrifice something. And I remember those words very young, because I started volunteering with disabled children for Duke of Edinburgh when I was around 14, 15, and seeing little children, you know, who wouldn't ever see, even 5, 6 years old, changes you, you know. So you start to understand the level of heartbreak and soul break many people carry, and the amount that they are willing to sacrifice if something like that can be changed. It also made me very afraid to work with illness, because I was afraid of hurting people. I was afraid of, you know, them getting overexcited and maybe it not working. So it slowed me down quite a bit as well. But the wound itself became really clear when I started studying alcoholism. And they tell you the story of, it's actually a Greek story, of Perseus, who has this massive wound in his masculinity that cannot be cured, and has to go on a pilgrimage to heal himself by remembering who he is and reconnecting to God. And when I got into archetypes, suddenly I understood the collective consciousness. And there wasn't one story, there were many across all the religions about the wounded self. And that's when I realized that the parts of us were going somewhere, right? Even if we don't remember. And Course in Miracles matched it. Course in Miracles said that nothing is ever lost in the mind of God, right? It always goes somewhere. And that everything that we've lost will be returned to us like 7-fold or 14-fold if we're brave enough to go and ask for it to be returned. Whatever was taken, whatever was stolen, whether it's health or family or friendship, or that it will be returned. And that's when it clicked, that if we worked with the wounded self archetype, that the wound would have the answers to what caused the disease, even if it didn't have the answers to what was going to create wholeness.
Mm-hmm. In different techniques, we take different ways to connect to the divine. Yeah. Or I would like to say to remember that we are always connected with the divine.
Yeah.
In your medical intuitive technique, you choose the way through the heart into the heart of God. Why did you choose this way?
I chose it because of the emotions. I found because I tried many different induction techniques with hypnosis. Sometimes you would go through a rainbow. Sometimes you would go through your head. There was, like I said, there's always a door. There's always steps or a cave. But I realized that for me, when I went through the heart, I had much deeper access to my emotions, both for clearing them, but also for facing them. Like there was courage in the heart that I needed. I needed for what was coming. It takes a lot of courage to face your memories and to face everything that we are, for both your gifts and your failures. You know, so I find that going through the heart created that. And I also find that going through the heart affects the torus field and helps create the body faster than if I use other parts of the energy system. But I also have had, like, I chose the heart, but I've also had great success going through the sacral chakra and the womb as well. So the heart for me was what gave me the most shift in the torus field, but obviously hearts are made in the womb. So if people are more comfortable with their wombs, that will probably work too.
Yeah, okay. In the heart of God, we met the wounded self, and this wounded self could be an archetype, like you talked about the wounded healer archetype. It also could be parallel life or past life. And what do you think? What is the meaning of past lives for our health? Because, and to be honest, before I made your program, I avoided looking to past lives because I felt that often it was a distraction for bringing clarity in this actual life and to current relationships, and I won't do this. So this was what I thought before I did your program. Now I experienced it different. But what significance do past lives or parallel lives have for our health?
Let me break it down a little bit, and I'll tell you a bit of my own story just so you feel me, right? But when it comes to quantum physics, there is no past, there is no future. Everything is happening now. So what we think of as a past life is a trauma that our soul and our body still carries. I completely agree that many people use their past to stay in pain and to stay stuck. A lot of people don't know, not just with past lives, but with their childhood, how to move beyond the wound. And it can very much be used as a justification for, I am like this because this happened in my childhood, instead of as the ability to grow, which is why we use, the re-imprinting. It's why the wound is the beginning, not the end with us, right? But just so the others that are feeling the same as you are listening, it is not just past lives that can be used as an excuse. Anything can be used as an excuse to stay in pain, right? So don't dismiss what God brings you because you're afraid that will keep you stuck. God will never keep you stuck, right? Our stubbornness might keep us stuck. But if you're seeing another life, you're seeing it for a reason. Now, I was like you. Not only was I, like you said, I was a law degree student. I had no belief in anything like this whatsoever. And before that, I was very Christian. So this was wrong, right? As far as I was concerned, this was just wrong. But as experience changes you. So when I had my spiritual awakening, all I could see every night when I went to sleep was the different lifetimes. And this must have kept happening for almost a year. Every day when I went to sleep was another life. And I remember my spiritual teacher back then, he had faith in a 17-year-old, he would say to me, don't get attached. Exactly. Don't get attached. It's just clearing. And apparently Buddha went through something similar. And a lot of people that wake up go through something similar, and they call it like a lifetime review. Right? But what it did for me was see just how much not finishing a life can keep that image, because to us it's a lifetime, but if you look at it energetically, it's what's a karmic meism or a samskara. It's a wheel that keeps on spinning, right? And that wheel, just like the wheel of a cinema screen that flicks pictures across the wall, is flicking pictures in your brain and in your soul and still manifesting. So what you do when you do a past life healing is you're stopping the wheels that are manifesting things that are no longer true, or no longer where you are, and getting the gifts and the lessons that will empower you in this life to be all that you can be, right? Because the idea is that that lifetime was supposed to support you. It was meant to be a stepping stone to your greatness and manifestation. And if it's not finished, if it was too painful to look at, even if there was too much power for you to understand or hold, then you won't be able to take the gifts with you, which is what's supposed to happen when we transition, when we cross over, right? We're meant to take everything we learn back to God and have it kind of like recreated like our DNA, so it can be even better next time. So that's how it can serve. The way that my first few experiences with past lives, one was with my best friend. He was born with spina bifida and his foot was completely curved. And we used to sleep on bunk beds in rooms after school. And I would have the dream of him and me being in battle together. And he fell, he got wounded, and somebody drove a cart over his foot. Now, when I asked why that kept manifesting, God said that was his blessing, because what he asked God in return was to never go to war again. So that foot meant that even if there was conscription, he would never have to go. He paid his price, right? So there are many beautiful things that come down from other lives as well. Promises, blessings, oaths. Some illnesses are blessings in disguise, right? Because they will stop you from having to commit murder, or stop you from having to do the crazy things that humans may ask you to do just to stay alive. But lives are a powerful, powerful thing, whether they're if you think about them as a wheel, but if you also think that the beginning and the end pull, right? So it creates almost like a tornado or a vortex. If you think like this is the biggest bit and you have a little one pushing and a little one pulling, and it's like a tunnel of water, it's a strong energy. If you heal the beginning or you heal the end, the whole shape changes, right? So both, and it's an interesting thing, isn't it? We think of this life as the present, but it might not be. It might not be where the biggest focus of your soul is. It just changes everything. So that's how we use lifetimes. That's how it comes up, particularly with disabilities. Before we're born, it can be very relevant. And sometimes with understanding why our family did things, or even why we chose this family to incarnate to. So there you go.
Yeah. To me, my understanding of time completely changed through this training.
Mm-hmm.
We also learned about scanning the body for vitamins, minerals, toxins, nutritional habits. From your point of view, how important is healthy nutrition and drinking water for a healthy body?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, whenever you have bad nutrition, it's a manifestation of neglect. Right? So that shows the size of the wound, the ability to ignore yourself and your need to be nourished is a huge, huge cause of disease. A huge cause of disease, not just for you, but for the family line, particularly if you're a woman. 70% of gestational illnesses are caused by malnutrition. 78% of women will struggle with malnutrition after they give birth. So you can see the impact on our genetics, on our DNA, on children without even having to blink. And what's happening with our food supply and things like that is pretty mad, because we're not nourishing the soil the way that we need to. We're not taking care of the earth the way that we need to. But it's a huge part of health, and by itself, I find particularly with clients that don't have a belief in a higher power, that are very much stuck in the science, it can be the only way to get them back to health quickly. Because God finds a way. So if you're not going through the heart and you're not going through the soul, then he'll come through the plants. He'll come through the so but it's very, very, it's a huge part of it. And I think that's another big bit of what we've forgotten, is that health, it takes us back to Course in Miracles. Health is simple, right? Good food, good sleep, good hydration, which is scary, like, especially with hydration, it's mad. Like, you can be getting the perfect nutrition, and with bad hydration, nothing will stand. The body is water. There is no separation. Yeah. So you will live for months on water. You will die after a couple of weeks, with maybe a couple of weeks maximum with no water. You will live for months with no food. So and there's so many chemicals in our water supply that are hormone based as well, because when our filters were created, they weren't created to filter out pharmaceuticals. They weren't created to filter out hormones. And this is what is being demanded of it without it being updated. So there's a lot of chemicals in the water that were never there before, and there's a complete unawareness of the damage that not having good water is causing. Not to mention that water imprints the memory of wherever it goes. So water that used to stay in the country is now traveling around the world, and it's carrying a lot more energy and a lot more information than it ever has before. Which is impacting people's bodies, and I think putting a lot more stress on people's bodies than ever before, and they're not even thinking about it. So it is essential, and understanding your own nutrition, your own sleep, your own water, your own lifestyle habits is a part of the following the breadcrumbs to what's really going on. Because the way you take care of yourself is a mirror of what you think you deserve. But yeah, it is 100% essential. And if you have somebody who's sick but doesn't believe in anything, food is the way to go.
Yeah. What I found very special in your training was dealing with death. Yeah, you say that it's important to heal our relationship to death. And I found it very important. I think we exclude these important times of birth and death too much from our lives. And in terms of health, can you explain the audience why is it important to deal with death?
There's a few reasons. Having a good death is a very powerful thing, and this is across all cultures, whether you're looking at Norwegian culture, Indian culture, Chinese culture, particularly China, India, Brazilian shamanism. Having a bad death was one of the greatest acts of shame or dishonor, right? So it carries with it an energy that can lead us to A, choose a negative incarnation in the future, right? B, recreate that same negative death in our family line, like where there's one, cancer death, there are many others. Where there's one suicide, there are many others. Where there's one, what's it called? Like coma, there are many others. You'll find that the patterns of death run in a family because the feelings have not been felt, right? Death, from our Western perspective, has been taught to us as a punishment, right? Whenever you see death in a movie, you see somebody being killed for a crime. It's rare to see a good death nowadays where, the family is gathered around and there is, conversation and laughter and connection. I haven't seen a movie like that in a long time, right? But we're taught that death is a punishment, which is a lie. Death is a birth into eternal life, right? And there are traditions to help us cross over in peace, because deaths can be sudden as well as being planned. Sometimes that's the blessing of sometimes a disease, is that it gives the whole family notice that that person is going, and it gives them time to say goodbye. And it also clears up the resentment and the issues that were had around that person, because people suddenly know that they are no longer going to be embodied, right? When the death is sudden, whether it's, like a mental illness sudden through suicide, or whether it's an accident, or whether it's what's the word? A disappearance, the family doesn't get that chance to complete the lifetime, to learn everything with the presence of the person there. Those conversations are unhad. And then the learning is not completed within that family system. What was supposed to be taken from it is just there. So, and very often distortions are there. So, because grief is such a powerful feeling, if somebody dies before their time, members of the family might feel like they shouldn't be alive. They have no right to be alive, and they might live like they're already dead, right? They might shut themselves away from the world or start hoarding things, which was very common in wars. You see, like the people that hoard, 9 times out of 10, there's at least one war death in the family, right? Because they're keeping everything just in case. Grief is a strange bedfellow. And there's no time to grieve. In our culture, very often there's even no funeral to grieve. You kind of get an email or something happens on the other side of the world, and it's like the person never existed, which is very damaging to the human psyche. Where I realized death was important was dealing with children who were dying, and parents or friends or family members that would not be able to have that conversation with the child or with each other, and understanding the pain that was causing, both for the person who was dying because they weren't allowed to say what they needed to say, and for the people who were staying behind, who felt like having that conversation was giving up hope. So it was quite interesting. The families that were brave enough to have those conversations were normally the ones that were able to go on and rebuild. And the ones that weren't able to have those conversations seemed to be stuck in an unending grief. And that's where I knew it had to be in there. And I knew that there had to be at least a conversation, not just with you guys about the clients, but about your own lives, and where these conversations had never been had, or people had just gone. But death is huge. Like we talked about before, it pulls. So you'll often see death doors for people and very similar to the ones their parents had. And what's very funny, that especially that I see now as I'm getting older, is that people know so much that they have conversations. So, for example, my husband's father, he died of a stroke when he was in his mid-50s. And my husband, around the same age as his father, was, suddenly started getting the insurance policies and writing wills. And you could feel the death door, even though he wasn't going to go in it, you could feel it saying to him, life isn't permanent, get your ducks in a row, make sure everything is organized. And it's so common and it's interesting how it's earlier for women than men, because we used to die in childbirth. So we tend to get it triggered 25, 30. It's like everything has to be organized in case something happens to us. And for men, it tends to be 45, 50, because that's where it happened to their parents. That's where their fathers left. But death doors are powerful things. And if they're not closed, they can be powerful enough to pull us into them or to get us to recreate them.
Yeah. So time is running. There was so much more in your training. We could talk about inner child, inner parent, family constellations, so much, how to deal with trauma. Yes, but I think I will link your page under this video so that people can find you and look if they are interested in your programs.
Sounds like a plan, darling.
Yeah, and I would like to thank you so much for your time and for your work. And yeah, is there anything else you would like to say? What it's important to you?
I think the most important thing is the people who are listening, and to know that medical intuition is real and that it is a powerful gift, and that they deserve to have it trained and they deserve to have it awakened, and that even people who, especially the people who think I'm not ready, I'm not qualified, I'm not worthy, it can save lives. It's in you for a reason. And it's been forgotten, it's been hidden for a long time. And even when it's been brought back in a superficial way. So if you want space to really go where you need to go with this, then I'm happy to have a conversation. I'm happy to hold that, because I really think that there are so many people praying for you to wake up to those gifts, and particularly in German, there are so many powerful healers, there are so many powerful teachers, there are so many powerful people. And you guys have your own wounds that need to be healed, right? So I don't know who it's going to call, but I know that you're important. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Skylar.
You're welcome.